Hello and welcome to 696, and I'm recording here smack out in the woods. It's getting chilly out here, so I will not be too long. You can actually see my breath being giving out a faint, whatever that's called in English, I forgot, fog. So I will try to make it just a first try out at finding out what could the body be and what could action be. Difficult questions indeed, but you need to sort of ponder the terrain before you can go into the details, and this is what I'm trying now. First try out on this. Could call it body action series, a sub-series to the original series. Let's see how it goes. You could call it practice. In certain cultures, practice is very important. To generalize enormously, one could say objects is very important. In this culture, objects, localization, quantification, and such stuff. Things are firmly established, not by someone, but by no one. These are the objects coming from nowhere. And Thomas Nagel took up this, and I think Thomas Nagel is so interesting that he's definitely worth a lecture by himself. That's Thomas Nagel. I'm not sure about the pronunciation, but it is indeed very clear criticism of an age-old idea of perspective from nowhere. And that could actually be the Western stance. It's not in the East. One subject that is completely different there is epistemology, the doctrine on knowledge. And it's because there is no general knowledge like out there taken by some mysterious entity, panopticon-like thing that we say has a quality and we call it a fact without there's been a person around. And it's true, we have truths. All these things are very, very weird, and Thomas Nagel is just scratching on a surface that contains something really infected, and these things are problematic. What would a truth be that is not said by anyone? Truth out there somewhere in nowhere? One fancy name for this tendency could be disembodied knowledge. But I think that's not even starting to do the criticism just. It's worse than that. But this is not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the other direction. The direction the Stoics, the pre-Socratics, the post-Socratic, you name them, they did not take that way. We are going to take the way of the body today. This is the first tryout. And practice is in the bottom. Some cultures are very, very specific with what you do. I'm not talking about the object. And it needs to be precision, and it has to be in a certain order. So the order and the action is all important. It's a little bit like the robots of Pfeiffer, the Swiss guy. There the movement has the intelligence. And here in these cultures the intelligence is also in the movement, but also the knowledge. Knowledge is a movement. I think that could be a good way of approaching the stuff, instead of thinking, oh no, we're not going to have any objects. What you should ask is, how could you have objects if you don't have movement? But look at those robotic things that Pfeiffer constructed. Of course they do have objects, to the extent they can move about and do things. And objects are important for perception and doing things with them. And that's probably much more effective with movement as base. And movement could also be the source of permanence. That's shown from quantum mechanics. So it's not about losing on some end, you gaining on all ends. It wouldn't be any point talking about non-dual aspects if there were a loss somewhere. If you have a misunderstanding and you learn what is the correct way, there is no loss. There shouldn't be loss, and this is characteristic of this specific problems. Could be other problems there is a loss. If you have an infected leg, and then maybe the solution of the problem could be some sort of loss of the leg while gaining the body. So in that case, you weigh one, you lose this and you gain this. This is not the case here. There's no loss. Objects don't become less real, they become more real. Distinction doesn't disappear, they become stronger. Qualities become stronger. The subject doesn't disappear. It becomes more present and it becomes continuous. So therein there is no problem. The problem is to understand it and to change yourself. Here we need to change ourselves. I could say, yeah, there you could say there is the difference between the first one, when I amputate the leg, or when you learn something, the modern traditional way that you just memorize, or barely memorize even, just are part of the panopticonic truth. You don't have to do any effort for that. But here in this case, you need to make a conscious effort to go from unconscious guiding, as Alexander would call it, to conscious guiding. Constructive conscious control of the individual. And that is done by thinking. You need to understand everything that you have and you see around you, and that is you stemming from something that is more original, something that is more forceful, that is not diluted. It's not taken by firm focal settings that cannot be changed. Think about a camera. Say that your camera got rusty and you can't change the focal setting. Only a small portion of the photos will actually be sharp and in focus. Most of them will be either unsharp or unfocused. Most of them will actually be both not focus and not sharp. So what do you need to have in order to be able to have sharp photos? You will definitely need to be able to change the focal setting. That is what it's about in a nutshell, nothing else. Being embodied means that you are in reality and you will be able to change your focal setting. Thereby you can do your business. The most perfect, the most exact, the most effective, everything. The first little fragment I will start with is a little article here called Adjustment of the Mind. It's written by a chap called Mike Cross. The adjustment of the mind. Once the bodily posture and the breathing are adjusted, we're talking about some sort of practice here, I want to define what it is. The practitioner next learns to adjust the mind. That means that the practitioner consciously moves to enter a state of meditation. In so doing, the practitioner learns to disengage himself from the concerns of daily life. That is to say, one tries to stop the operation of the conscious mind. However, if one tries to stop the mind by using one's mind, the mind which is trying to stop itself is still operative. In other words, it is practically impossible to stop the mind by using the mind. Instead, in meditation you try to accomplish this by immobile bodily posture and breathing exercise. In this connection, it will be informative to know how the practitioner experiences breathing as he or she deepens meditation. We can identify three basic stages. 3. The practitioner can hear audible sound of the incoming and outgoing breaths. This is the rough and gross breathing. This is followed by the second stage, in which he or she can feel the pathway of the incoming and the outgoing breaths. Breathing at this point becomes subtle, in that there will be no longer audible sound of the breath, but simply a stream of life energy. In the first stage, there is no more feeling of the incoming and outgoing breaths. When this occurs, the practitioner can settle into deeper meditational state. Also, it is significant to note that as a practitioner enters a deeper state of meditation, the interval between inhalation and exhalation is prolonged, i.e., the retention of breath is prolonged as the reduction of breathing activities occurs. Meditation trains one to sit face to face with one's own self, while creating a psychological isolation from the external world. With this, one enters into an internal world of mind. As the practitioner attempts to enter the world of the mind, various things start surfacing in the field of the practitioner's meditative awareness. These are mostly things of concerns that have occupied the practitioner in the history of his or her life, or things the practitioner had consciously suppressed for various reasons initially. The practitioner experiences recent desire, anxieties, concerns, ideas, and images that have surfaced in his or her daily life. A psychological reason that the practitioner experiences these various things is due in part to the fact that the practitioner has lowered the level of conscious activity by assuming the meditation posture and doing the breathing exercise. The mechanism is the same as when one has a dream at night. When the level of consciousness is lowered, the suppressive power of ego consciousness weakens, and consequently the autonomous activity of unconscious begins to surface. However, these desires, images, and ideas are distraction insofar as meditation concerns. This is because in meditation you must learn to focus your awareness on one thing. One must learn just to observe without getting involved in them. That is, one must learn to disidentify oneself with them. In the process of deepening meditation, one can roughly identify the three distinct stages: the stage of concentration, the stage of meditation, and the stage of absorption. In the stage of concentration, the practitioner concentrates, for example, on the lower abdomen, establishing a dualistic relationship between the practitioner who is concentrating and the lower abdomen that is in focus of concentration. This dualistic relationship is broken gradually as the practitioner moves into the stage of meditation. The activity of the ego consciousness is gradually lessened, and the barriers it sets up for itself are gradually removed. When the practitioner enters the stage of absorption, the dualistic framing of the mind will be removed, such that the mind starts structuring itself non-dualistically. There will be no separation or distancing between an object of the mind and the activity of the mind itself. Be the same thing. It's like a tryout of having word being the same as the world, because usually we get confused there and we think we create a distinction, but we're actually just misusing language. So the idea of a distance is an illusion. What we do is just a mistake, and that mistake does not follow a rule because it's a mistake. Non-rule following mistake. It's not a metalogical mistake where you can say there's always a distance, and we understand what that distance is. But we can say distance and not mean anything with it. That's possible to do. As the practitioner repeats the process over a long period of time, he or she will come to experience a stage in which no things appears. The meditation uses the phrase no mind to designate the state. No mind does not mean mindless state. Nor does it mean that there is no mind. It means that there is no conscious activity of the mind that is associated with the ego consciousness in the everyday standpoint. In other words, no mind is free mind that is not delimited by ideas, desires, and images. No mind is a state of mind in which there is neither superimposition of the ideas nor a psychological projection. That is, no mind is a practical transcendence from the everyday mind, without departing from the everydayness of the world. And here I come into something called anti-philosophy. Anti-philosophy maintains, among other things, that reason in its discursive use is incapable of knowing and understanding in total what reality is. For example, what human beings are and what their relationship to nature is. For this reason, Zen contends that physical nature and human nature must be sought in an experiential dimension, practically transcending and hence transcending the standpoint of the ego consciousness. That is to say, we must go beyond the one and the two, as both these stances are prone to generate one-sided stance and hence incomplete worldview. Instead, they must be sought in depths of one's mind and beyond. And this is sort of a methodological stance. It has more to do with how should you do something in order to learn something. Most philosophers in the West are not didactical. They only have one level, and that level is supposed to cover all instances. I'd say one level doesn't even cover one person's instances, because we need more levels for that. Because knowledge is in different levels. It's a little bit like a cogwheel. They have different levels and they need to pass into each other to make a connection. So force can go from one cogwheel to the other. Speed can go from one cogwheel to another. I think that's about enough for today. I introduced myself to this, and I should maybe end with how you get rid of dualism. Maybe this is a in meditation you try to get rid of dualism by using the phrase not to. The use of the phrase not to expresses a proclivity to favor the simple and the concrete, so that it is not expressed as a negation of dualism. This overcoming is an existential practitioner project, a goal for the meditator, although it's paradoxically stated as if you face it, it goes away. This is because facing presupposes a dualistic stance. To in not to designates any two things appearing from within the everyday standpoint, especially when it is taken to designate an absolute sense of reality. I think this is against meta-logic somehow. This standpoint, as mentioned in the foregoing, relies on the discursive mood of reasoning to understand reality, while presupposing ego consciousness as the standard referential point, from sensory perception as a point of reference. One of the salient characteristics of this standpoint is that the world appears to be dualistic in nature, that is to say, it recognizes two things to be real. The meditation question to this standpoint in when it's used and the paradigm for daily life included for philosophical thinking. For this standpoint accept its foundation an individual discrete I, with a belief that I am self-contained and self-sufficient, and therefore I'm distinguished and over there, creating both a psychological and physical distance between them. Epistemological speaking, meditation observes that this renders opaque, or best translucent, the experiential domains beyond the sensible. So we are stranding in some sort of unreality, one could say, and this is this translucent or transcendence. And this transcendence can also be described as being distant, foggy, not clear, not valuable, not so very good for a purpose, not informing, not giving knowledge. I like this informing idea, that space is informative and it informs knowledge. This is lost by transcendence, or diminished gravely by transcendence. Well, the first try, what can you do? Why, thank you very much. Bye bye från Hisingen and the forest. Bye.